Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw. Played for, of course, many years with the New York Rangers and then the Los Angeles Kings, and also known to you all for being a competitor on the CBS Survivor Series. And with this is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week, except this week when on Monday I had babysitting duty for my grandkids, and we were unable to do the podcast, so I apologize by that, but it couldn't be helped.
So just so people know too, Kevin Allen, one of the great things I admire about you and love about you is that you're a great family man. And I mean that very seriously. You're obviously great at your job, writing and everything. We're good friends, but I've always admired that about you, being a good family man. So,
well, I appreciate that. It was one of those things where I didn't know I was going to end up watching her, but my wife couldn't get back, and I ended up doing it. So it worked. It was sad that we didn't get to do our podcast, but it worked out fine.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Good job.
Anyway, Tom, this is, I think, an interesting subject. I really want to get your opinion on it as a former player. But, we're in the midst, obviously, of this pandemic. I'm not telling anyone anything they don't already know. And I think everyone feels this general malaise about everything. Everything's just kind of blah. And it's really reflected, I think, in our sports watching habits. I'm looking at these numbers, and we all know that the Stanley Cup Finals, their ratings were down. The NFL at midseason, even though this is a pretty exciting season that we've got going here with Pittsburgh on a roll, and the MVP race hitting it up. Kyler Murray in Arizona suddenly is the hot property and everything else. At midseason, they're down 6%. The NBA and Major League Baseball had historic lows in terms of ratings, in terms of their World Series and NBA final. The Masters had its lowest rated Masters since 1957, down 51% from last year. So much is going on. What do you attribute that to, Tom? I mean, in terms of the hockey and the NBA and the baseball, it feels like it's not, the rhythm is, we're out of rhythm because we're not playing it at the same time. But, we should be bored and we should be watching more sports, but we're not. Have we found other things to do, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think an alert there.
Yeah, it's on my phone. Sorry about that.
To me, I think it's interesting. I really never thought of that because all the talk is always like, "Oh, geez, we can't wait for the sports." The sports had stopped there for a period of time. We can't wait for it to get going again. And I know for me, when hockey started, I mean, especially the games around in the afternoon, it was nice outside. I set up a TV outside, and I was watching games every day. Pretty much, it was fun. But yeah, now it's like I think the last thing I want to do is turn my TV on. I try to keep the TV off now. I've been stuck at home, and you're trying to get outside and do other things and work more, do have other chores. I think the TV. I just think in general, for me, like I talk to a lot of people how negative they are just about like TV in general. It's like, let's get out and do something else or watch Netflix or whatever. But it's actually still surprising to see those numbers because you figure all like the Masters numbers too. Man, I thought like all the golf fans would have just been dying for a big time tournament like that. But maybe it's the change in, now it's at a different time of the year than it was in the past. I don't know. That's tough one.
Well, but to me, I kind of thought that would help it. Like the uniqueness of playing the Masters, in the fall, as opposed to the spring, and that's a completely different tournament. I mean, they had rain right off the bat. The greens were soft. It was interesting. Tiger Woods came out of the gate strong on Friday, which should have brought people in, even though he faltered on the weekend. But it should have initially brought in people, but it really didn't, have the impact that we've seen, in the past. And I really do wonder if it's just a matter of, like I read the Home Depot stock is up 25%. Because people are doing a lot of home improvement projects, and they're all, running into Home Depot to pick up this and that. And I wonder if that's the case. And, have people reconnected with their families?
Yeah. Maybe we're just living our lives differently now, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said. I mean, we're not, I know that I don't plan my weekends around sports. You got other things you're doing, and
I still enjoy watching my football on Sunday, but
I do too. Yeah.
But if something else comes up, it's not like I have to be tied to that TV.
Yeah. Well, I do sense there's some eagerness about the next NHL season. I think the playoffs, the 2014 format, I mean, other than the 7 teams who were completely out of it, everybody was in not long ago. Like they were all active.
Yeah.
And, we had an active free agent season. So teams have changed. I do think people now, the news over the last couple of days has been good for the NHL in this regard. And I'll qualify it a little bit. Pfizer came out and said, we've got a vaccine that's working. It's over 90%. Moderna came out and said, we've got one as well. And it's in the 90s as well. And then today, Pfizer came out and said, yeah, it's even better than we thought. It's going to be over 95%. Right. And it's working with the elderly. Now, the reason that's good news, as everyone knows, is that the NHL needs fans. They don't have the massive television package that saves their bacon if they play in empty arenas. So, they need fans in. Now, what they're saying is I don't know if that it's going to help until maybe the playoffs, if at all, but they're saying that it could be commonly available. So Tom and I can get it, and you guys can all get it in either late spring or early summer. If it's early summer, it's not going to help, but late spring, if you can get a vaccine in April. And I think more people will be willing to go into an arena if they've been vaccinated. Right. Now, I don't know that they'll fill the arenas, but I think you'll get more people in. I'd be honest with you, there will be people who would go now, even without a vaccine.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, because that's just the way of the world. That it's almost bothersome too when you see people and you're being careful and doing your thing and wearing your mask, and then someone just will say casually like, "Oh, you guys got to live your life."
Totally.
Well,
and there's other people out there saying that that their doctors themselves are telling them not to get the vaccine right away, that they want to have it be out there for a while.
Yeah, although I think from watching the news reports, anyway, it seems like now that everyone's had a chance to read what they've kind of gone through, like this is a streamlined process. Like they've done it faster than they normally do it, and so that's worrisome. However, the people who are reading it that know a lot about it like the way they've done it in the streamlined format. Right. And I think, that's crucial. And I think it does help that, some of the leaders, some of the medical people said they're going to take the vaccine, the people that know the most about it, and I think some of the leaders have come out and said as well that they're going to take it as well. And I think that will help. So, but, it's still, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. That's the thing. So when you're streamlined it like this, but anyway, that would be good news because
and where you're in the country, I think matters too, right? Like here in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. I mean, it's different than when you talk to people in Florida. Florida seems that it's much more open. They're going out to restaurants with no masks on and everything. Here, it's everybody pretty much. Yeah,
for sure. In fact, one of the issues that they're now kind of trying to address now is you're more likely to die if you get it in a rural area because they have no experience in dealing with it.
Right.
And so they need the vaccine more, but they're not likely to get it first because it's too hard and the population is too small.
Yeah.
You're trying to send it to the higher population areas. So in other words, if you have underlying conditions and you contract the virus and you live in New York, because New York has been dealing with this for so long, the doctors actually have a pretty good handle now on how to treat it.
Yep.
But if you get it in the middle of Montana at a small hospital where they've only seen 6 cases, so it's really kind of complicated. But anyway, we're not a news show, but we do have to discuss that because it does play a role in the thinking. I mean, as the NHL tries to figure out what to do, one of the things that they've got to factor in is at least in terms of the number of games we're going to play. Because the more games they play without fans, the more money the teams are going to lose.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing. I haven't heard any talk about there not being a season next year because the owners are saying we're just going to lose too much money.
I don't think that's the case either. I think the owners. I have heard that said to me, from general managers that there are owners who want to play fewer games.
Right.
That they don't want to lose, $80 million. they can put up with some losses.
And then prorate the player salary.
Well, yeah, they like to do that. It's going to be interesting to see what those negotiations look like.
Right.
Because we saw them in baseball and that didn't go well.
Yes. But at the end of the day, they went ahead and did it. They went down to the
but they played a lot fewer games than they were going to. So
right. And that's the thing. Like in the NHL, like the baseball is going to say, well, listen, we already renegotiated the CBA, right?
Yeah, they are going to say for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, this is one of the cases when sometimes both things can be right. Yeah, like the players have every right to say, look, this is the deal you cut. Yeah. Because you thought it was a favorable deal for you.
Right.
And now that it turned out it's a favorable deal for us, now you're saying, right. But on the other hand, owners are going to say, well, look, we're billionaires, but we can't lose 80 million on top of losing what we just lost before.
Yes, no question. Yeah.
So it's going to be complicated.
Yeah. If I'm a billionaire, I'm not going to say, well, I'm going to lose $80 million so you as a player can make your millions of dollars.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Those issues are so complicated, and the average fan just wants to boil it down because none of us can really relate to that level of money. You can maybe a little bit, only in that when you were making your $350, is that your
max ever made in the NHL was $330,000, I think.
Okay, yeah. So when you were making $330, people were. What was the average wage? 40,000.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. So you didn't hit the jackpot, right. But you were making more than the average Joe.
Totally. So for playing a game of hockey, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But the way I've always viewed it is like you're an entertainer. Like that doesn't exist without your ability to play.
Definitely.
So that's why I've never begrudged to players their money. It's not up to the always gets me in trouble when I say this, but I'm going to say it again anyway. It's not up. This is America. And in America, it's not up to the employee to say, I'll take less, for the good of the game or whatever. It's up to the employer to make the determination of what they're going to pay. So,
although and I hear you, and I do agree with you. I mean, there's times in the past where like Ray Bourque, who was one of the all-time great players, got criticized pretty soundly by the Players Association at the time for taking less money than everybody thought he could get. The theory is because he was the best player on the team and took less than he should have gotten, that meant that everybody else was going to get less than that team as well. So
that's a complicated issue because when you join a union, it's the good of the whole. You're part of a larger group. I interviewed Ray about that story years ago, and I remember he says, well, we fought this right for self-determination to be able to have a say on where we're going to play and everything. And now when I get that right and I say I want to play in Boston, now you tell me, well, no, you can't do that. You got to do it for what's best for all the other players. Well, when do I get to do what's best for Ray Bourque?
And if Ray Bourque really believed it, I think his theory was that he really believed there's a limited budget for salaries with the Bruins. And if he took too much of it, then there wasn't going to be enough for the other guys to go around. Therefore, the team wasn't going to be that.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. And you still see people do that today. The one thing that I've always liked about the NBA is when those players would get together and sort of orchestrate, and spread out the money from the salary cap so they could all play together.
Yeah.
Isn't that the definition of teamwork?
Yeah.
Excuse
me. I agree totally. Yeah. It is interesting how that's kind of evolved, right? It wasn't that way until really LeBron James when he went to Miami. Is that where that really started when he did that?
Yeah. No, that's it was kind of interesting. Yeah. I mean, you could have done that in the 1980s, call up top defenseman and say, why don't we? Of course, you didn't have free agency, but other than that, it would have worked.
What's so funny though, we think about it now. It was like taboo to talk about our salaries. It just never came up. And when I think it was 1986 when we first started talking about whether we should have salary disclosure or not. It was a big debate, and it didn't happen until 1992. I think it was when they finally had salary disclosure. And it's amazing to think now that was that big of a decision for us.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. it's kind of unionism and fighting. Like Bob Goodenow did such a tremendous job in that era.
Yep.
Like he was one of the, he was the mover and shaker in terms of full salary disclosure and, getting it all out there, because once everybody knew, then you can say, hey, look, I'm better than so-and-so. Yeah. And he's making this. And plus then you got an idea of, what could be had out there.
Yeah. And I think Wayne Gretzky was found out that Dave Taylor was making more money than him. Now, Dave Taylor was a fantastic player.
Right.
Playing in Los Angeles, and Wayne was still in Edmonton at the time. But once I think that's how it went. And once he found out what Dave was making, and he's took off from there. And then once Wayne took off, and everybody else got dragged up with him.
Going back to those 1980s, and I've said this before, and this is a slight exaggeration, but not by much. I always said there should have been a Gretzky tax on all the teams in the league.
Oh, yeah.
Because in the 80s, he carried this league. Yeah. Like, it was so big when Gretzky would show up in an NHL city that it's hard to describe now.
Well, I really, as you know, I witnessed the change. So I saw it from the days when the Kings were in the purple and gold jerseys before Wayne got there. And we had a really good hockey team at that time. But, we'd go into some buildings like on a Tuesday night, and nobody really cared that much. And all of a sudden, Wayne showed up. Not only was the Forum packed, but it was packed with movie stars and all celebrities and everything. But every time we went into a building, didn't matter what day of the week it was packed. They were there to see Gretzky.
Even before, when he was with the Oilers. Like, I remember being in Detroit working for the Port Huron Times-Herald, and Wayne Gretzky made his one trip into Detroit, and he'd hold a press conference. Yeah. It wouldn't be a scrum around his cubicle after the morning skate. He'd come in, and, we were all in the Olympia room. There'd probably be 50, every television news station was there. All the columnists, Joe Falls, everybody was there showing up and talking about the Gretzky phenomena, and everywhere he went. And he sold out like, I don't remember what the numbers were, but it was close to 100% attendance in every road game he played.
Absolutely. And it wasn't, you're right. It wasn't just selling out, but you could feel the difference.
The energy, people wanted to see him. People wanted to talk to him.
I kind of thought it was because I was playing, but I think that, I guess that wasn't it, right?
Yeah. Well, and like, it was so much fun. Like, you'd get up in the morning, and back then, we didn't have the internet like we have now. So first thing you do is run to the paper and see how many points you got. Yeah. And then when Lemieux showed up, now you had two players to look. So Lemieux, Gretzky would get 5 points, Lemieux would have 4, and it was just fun to watch. Like, I remember it's a legendary story at USA Today. USA Today started in the early 1980s, and before I got there, this happened, where a guy who was on the agate desk in the scoring summary, where we had listed who scored the game-winning goal for Edmonton, he just wrote God, and it got through on the paper. Nobody saw it.
That's good.
Yeah, and it was hard to describe.
Yeah, speaking of popular players, I saw where Al Samuelson was signed as assistant coach with Florida Panthers. And I say popular, I'm being sarcastic, because when he played, probably one of the most hated guys I've ever seen in the National Hockey League. But people talk about him now like he's the nicest guy in the world. Everybody loves Al Samuelson, right? So maybe started me thinking about like some of the other guys around the league in the past that you just hated. I think everybody hated him, and ended up being not bad guys. We played a charity alumni game against the Boston Bruins, home and home last year, and Kenny Linsman was playing. And man, I remember he would just do everything to just get you mad. I mean, we hated him, but he was playing in the alumni game, and he's actually a decent guy too. It's the first time I really sat down and talked to him. But it ended up, so we played the first game in Boston. Second game was back in New York at Madison Square Garden, and he ended up hurt himself. He had to leave the game. He hurt his knee, and it was terrible to do this. But everybody was like, could happen to a better guy. Like that leftover hate was still there from the past, and he really wasn't a bad guy at all. So it was just kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, Alfie Samuelson really was a nice guy. He became an American citizen, and his kids are American-born players, you once you sat and talked to him, you couldn't believe it was the guy that played, because he played a hateful game. And Cam Neely, I'm not so sure what their relationship is like now, but I can't imagine that it's great.
He changed his career, right? But dirty.
He did. And whatever that injury was in his leg. He ended up with bone calcification issues and all kinds of things. And Samuelson played. I always said Chris Chelios played right on the edge of the rule book.
Yeah.
Alfie played on the other side of the rule book.
Those knee hits.
Yeah.
Guys that did that, and he did it on a regular basis too. That's like, man, that was nasty stuff. But I got to give him credit. If it's a weird kind of way, he did it to Cam Neely. He wasn't like he was picking on somebody that couldn't defend himself.
No, well, and he was beloved within his own dressing room. It always put the players in a bad spot though, because they'd have to kind of stick up for him. I mean, he was not he didn't shrink away from the action. He'd be in the middle of it, but guys would also come to his aid, and a lot of guys didn't like his tactics, but they like him as a person.
Yeah, the other guy was funny too. Was Dave Brown. Because especially playing, he was on Flyers and we were the Rangers. They just hated us, right? So like the stuff like him cross-checking Thomas Sandstrom, getting 10-game suspension for him all the time, and it was just like constantly. He was always trying to hurt somebody out there. And we ended up getting traded out to LA. And I'll never forget, we came back into Philadelphia and lined up for a face-off, and he comes beside me. I'm thinking, oh God, because I've got these memories of him, with the Rangers and Flyers series. And I thought, here we go. This is going to be something. He turns to me, hey, Tommy, how you doing? You liking it out there in LA? And I go, what's this guy doing? Like he was just, he hated the Rangers, and he was going to get from, I was on another team at that point, so it really didn't matter.
Yeah, he'd lost some of the hate.
Yeah. And then I was in the Asian business, and he was scouting for the Flyers, and I'd see him all the time. And one of the nicest, like almost like a sweet kind of guy, if you can believe it or not. But he was.
Well, and I did Stu Grimson's book with him, and he talked about the big fight that he had with Brown in MT. He actually knocked, he won his first pro fight against Dave Brown, and he won over the fans in Edmonton by doing that, but he knew he would have to fight him again, and it didn't go as well. In fact, he was severely injured. Grimson was. I can't remember the extent of the injury, but I think it required,
like he broke his cheekbone or something.
Yeah, he had to have surgery, and it was really a mess. And he told an interesting story on that. He said, rather than discourage me about fighting, he said, I felt this is exactly what I thought. If I can survive this, I can survive anything. Yeah. And so he said, I can do this job because, Brown had essentially came close to killing him, and he walked out of the hospital and was, back in business. So that's the way he viewed it. I mean, Brown was a tremendous fighter. If you're ranking fighters, even though, he didn't have the same kind of romance that guys like Kosher and Ty Domi and Bob Probert and Big Brashear and George the Rock had, but Brownie was as good as anybody when it comes to.
He was a left-hander too, right? Which is hard because most people are always throwing the punches with their right hand, so you're more used to it. You know that he's a left-handed fighter, but you're just not used to it.
And he. Speaking of guys, another guy who was completely different. Bob Probert was a panda bear off the ice.
Yeah,
like on the ice, he was a killer. Yeah. Although I will say this, and if you talk to people who knew him, they will all agree with this. He didn't love fighting. Like he needed to take a couple of punches to get into it. But once he got into it, you were going to pay for that.
Yeah, and he wasn't like a cheap player either, too. Like he wasn't out there. Like if he was going to, it's like I almost thought. Like I saw Marty McSorley and him fight. It was almost like there was like two gentlemen going at it, right? That like he wasn't going to take cheap shots at him. If he fell down, he wasn't going to. For the most part, he was taking care of him out there. So he was a scary man though. I remember Darren Langdon was my client. Tough guy with the Rangers, and he was telling me about fighting Probert one time, and he's saying how Probert kept hitting him, but he could hear him starting to breathe heavier and heavier. And now he knew he could jump in and start fighting. And I'm thinking to myself, if Probert's hitting me, I'm not sitting around like seeing how hard he's breathing.
It's Darren McCarty. I did his book as well.
Yeah,
and he tells a great funny story about McCarty was not a heavyweight. He really wasn't big enough.
Right.
He was like a light heavyweight. He'd fight those guys, but it wasn't. He was never going to be considered among the top fighters. He just wasn't big and strong enough. But he ended up fighting some of the heavyweights because he's Darren McCarty. And he tells this great story of he ended up with a fight with Tony Twist. He got lucky and held his own, and then Twist wanted to go again.
Yeah.
And Darren McCarty said, he was going to kill me. And Tony Twist was another ferocious fighter as well. Like he got a little hate built up when he fought. And he said, Twist was coming at him and saying, okay, let's go. And all of a sudden he hears Scotty Bowman going to the front of the bench yelling, McCarty, if you fight Twist in this game, you'll never see another minute of playing time. And Darren said, nothing I can do. Yeah. And he goes back to the bench. He said, I put my head down and said, thanks, Scotty.
That's smart by Scotty. I know I've told the story before, but I remember I fought to Marty McSorley, like his first year in the league. And I didn't know who he was, didn't know how tough it was. And I say this as a total compliment to Marty. Like Marty, when he first started, could not play hockey. And he was not a good enough skater, but he was going to stay in the NHL. And the only way he was going to stay was to fight all the time. So we got into a fight. It was a pretty good one. He didn't beat me, and I didn't necessarily beat him. But then the worst part after was that every time we played against the Pittsburgh Penguins and Marty was playing, he would say, Laidlaw, let's go. Laidlaw, let's go. And nothing was going on. He just needed somebody to fight, and I knew I'd fight him. So finally I said to him after a while, I said, Marty, listen, I'm not keeping you in the league. That's it.
Go find someone else to do that.
But to his credit, I'll tell you, Marty, he worked on his game, and he became a really good player. We played together in Los Angeles. He was a good player, and he continued to be a tough guy, too, and taking on everybody. So I a ton of respect for Marty, the way he handled himself. But it's funny. I remember, like always, Laidlaw, let's go. Laidlaw, let's go. It's like a broken record. It's like,
well, the 167-pound Jeremy Roenick, I don't know if it was his first fight or one of his first fights was against Marty McSorley. He had no idea who he was.
Yeah.
Got into this big brawl, and the guys on the bench, I remember talking to Keenan about it. They were afraid McSorley was going to kill him. JR had no idea who this guy was, just none whatsoever. And but he survived and came out of it. Probably
the other guy was Clark Gillies. I mean, and not that he wasn't the guy that you necessarily hated. It was more like you just like. Man, he'd get that one eyebrow going across the top of his forehead, and you're just like, oh, God, this guy's like we saw him beat up Eddie Hosper at one time and break the bone above the top of the jaw. And they're like, oh, God. And we had him on our show with Ron Greshner and Dave Maloney, must have been 2 months ago now. One of the nicest guys, he's complimentary, telling us how great players we were and all this stuff. He was a great guy. He was really good.
Wow. Yeah, he was a big guy compared to the players of that era too.
He wasn't like there's other guys like, I was close to his size. Barry Beck was probably his size as well, but it's just, he had this, he was just me. Like, and I think, you saw the games against Boston in the playoffs with him fighting Terry O'Reilly over and over and all the fights you get into. He's just, and wow. And watching him when he did Eddie Hosper that night too was like, oh God.
Yeah. I saw you had your marinara and meatballs saying yes. And it struck me, someone asked you whether or not, I can't prove how he phrased it, but he said something about, is there pork and beef in those? And you were like, no way. And I've never asked you this question because I love looking at your thing. Now, are you one of those, there's nothing more zealous than a convert. They say that. So are you one of those people that look at everyone else like we don't know what the hell we're doing, and and only you know what you're doing, or are you just do your thing and what everybody else wants to do?
You know what? I have the ability to be like that, where I'm like the only one that knows what's going on. But I've learned that I've got to other people can do their own thing. I wasn't when I was younger. If I had something I was doing, it was my way or the highway. That was it.
Yeah.
But I realized, and I've actually people have said that to me, even with workouts and everything, and all the motivation. It's like. Don't expect other people to get up at 3:30 in the morning. Don't expect other people to go for a march at 4:00. You got to temper it. Well, listen, the goal is just to get better every day. So it's the same with the diet too. I try to say to people, listen, you're not, actually I'm helping a young hockey player with his diet and everything now. And I'm trying to say to him, listen, you're not going to be perfect right away. You're going to evolve into, having a better, healthier lifestyle. So, but it is funny you say that because I definitely have that ability. I have to hold it back.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. I enjoy, seeing what, you're eating and, the pasta in particular, because that's such an evil thing. The
chickpea pastas. Yeah. And it's not for everybody. Some people try it and they can't do it. I I find it like if you put a nice healthy sauce on it, like it's all tomatoes that I made the marinara sauce with and everything, lots of garlic, lots of onion.
I saw you talk about making it from scratch, but you use canned tomatoes.
Well, yeah, you're right. It's not.
Why don't you use regular?
Well, I haven't got tomatoes here. I don't know if I live in a condo, so there's no. I guess I can go.
Yeah, I mean, you can grow them. You'd have to buy them, but
yeah, I can go buy them and do it. You're right. Good point.
Yeah. You should.
I actually have a pasta maker myself too, so I could actually make my own homemade pasta as well.
But you really cut down on the sugar too when
sugar, salts. Like I find now, like I make my own soup. So when I boil up all the vegetables, and I put them in the blender, and then put them back into the seasoned water that I had there. So there's no salt at that point. Now I may put a little bit of salt in for flavor, because when you look at canned soups, I mean, it's just tons of sodium in it. So this way,
right. I have looked at that. So anyway, well, we've pushed too long. We closed it off with a little True Grit lifestyle information, which is only appropriate when you were Tom Laidlaw. Yeah. But anyway, we appreciate everyone from joining us, and we'll be back again next week. And we're moving closer. It's really not going to be that far off when we're going to be playing hockey again.
And next week is Thanksgiving too, right? Is next week Thanksgiving?
Yeah. But I think we can squeeze 2 shows in before the now that's the only day of the year that you allow yourself. You're going to eat the apple pie, right? We'll
have some apple pie, but again, we'll go with turkey. And I'm thinking now we usually make regular mashed potatoes. We may go with sweet potatoes and do something with that.
Yeah.
But we'll get off the diet a little bit, but still take care.
Are your boys going to be able to come over? Or
actually, my boys are both going to be down in Florida.
Wow.
Actually, we're not sure what we're going to do yet, but yeah, I might be sitting by myself.
Wow. That would be a first for you, isn't it?
Yeah, that'd be since my sons are born. My oldest one's 30 years old. I've spent every Thanksgiving with them. So, but his wife lives down there. Her family lives down in Naples. So they've got an extra condominium down there. So they're both working from home. So they went down there for a couple of months to live down there. So it's more fair to her too. She gets to be with her family. So
for sure. Yeah. All right, sounds good, everybody. We'll see everyone next week.
See you Monday.